Welcome to the party. I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota. It's game week. Vikings, Bucks. Time to deep dive.
Hey, this is Arif from Wide Left. I totally forgot that it was game week. That's crazy.
I'm Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings. Are you ready to get hurt by Baker Mayfield? No, really. Ask yourself. Look in the mirror. Are you ready for that?
I'm ready. Hopefully you're ready too on today's Minnesota football party.
Locked On Sports Minnesota podcast. It's endless Minnesota Vikings talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota football party.
Happy game week. Happy Tuesday. It's a special Tuesday edition of the Minnesota football party. After a holiday Monday, we bring Arif Hasan and Luke Braun together for a Vikings Buccaneers preview show to kick off game week here on Locked On Sports Minnesota. So glad you've joined us today. Luke Inman continues his long weekend. He's on vacation. He'll be back with us tomorrow along with Reggie Wilson. Today's show brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook partner of Locked On. Make every moment more. Head to FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started and claim some great promotions, which I'll tell you about a little later in today's program, which will include a myriad of topics around Vikings, Buccaneers. Game is 5 days from now. We'll talk about that extensively. And I've got a couple questions for these fellas. Kirk Cousins in his contract year. Is it possible? Are we considering enough the possibility that Kirk Cousins experiences a major regression at some point? We'll also touch on Kyle Rudolph and his legacy as he announced he'll be retiring and as a Minnesota Viking, as most would expect. Also, nerdy stats of the day are going to be more prevalent now that we have real stats to talk about in football that are actually getting updated. And we'll bring that back on today's show. Should be a lot of fun. Arif Hasan, thank you for showing up on a Tuesday. I appreciate that. Not your usual day, so your biorhythms might be off. Same with you, Luke Braun. But it's good to have you both. Game week, football week. You guys excited? Arif, are you excited? Are you excited?
I'm so unbelievably pumped. I'm surprised you even asked. I think pretty obvious from my tone and face how rip-roaring ready I am to go. Is that a phrase I've ever used in my life?
Rip-roaring and ready to go.
Roaring.
Out of the 1950s. It feels like the Vikings haven't done anything except make roster cuts in about a week and a half. And that is true.
In fairness, they have also added some players in response to those roster cuts. They haven't gradually winnowed down the roster from 90 to 40.
Great point. N'Keal Harry added to the practice squad, by the way. Rest in peace, Alan Ali. Now they have successfully shed every offensive lineman that was on the roster, basically, in camp. That was of the backup variety or camp body variety.
Do you think this is like, because the Vikings will cycle through practice squad guys every so often. So, like, do you think this is like an instance where like Alan Ali is going to sign next week and then Jalen Reagor or N'Keal Harry is going to sign the week after that? And they're just going to go back because they do this sometimes.
No, you're right. It's they field like a 20-man practice squad in essence by rotating through some bodies so that they kind of can call upon some reserves if needed. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's kind of the strategy. And Spielman did this too.
Yeah. A practice they've ported over from the previous era.
It's the ultimate of minutiae in roster management. But if it feels like the Vikings haven't done anything, if there's been no updates, that's right. Now, I assume there's practicing.
Well, there's one big thing, but, there's the market-setting tight end contract.
Who? What?
And you're right about
Josh
that,
Allen.
too. I'm talking about football being played on football fields. There is not been...
That's true. They have not done that since January.
Yeah, no.
They are not unique in that particular regard, Sam. But yes.
And that's not even what I'm talking about. No one will ever know what I'm actually talking about because I can't get to the point. The Vikings took 3 days off, and then they had a day of press conferences, and then they took 4 days off, and this is from media activity. And I believe tomorrow will be the first day that media is invited back in. So it's been a little bit of a lull. We've gotten a chance to digest this roster. And now we do move the page forward to Vikings Buccaneers. Luke, Braun, give me some of your big storylines that you're looking ahead to.
Well, one thing that we should be watching is this Mike Evans thing going on in Tampa Bay. He's got a contract deal. It is unclear if he is going to play in this game or not, which obviously, that changes a lot strategically. The last I saw was a report from Jordan Schultz that said they're going to make like one last effort for a contract late in the week. And it's either going to get done or he's going to start holding out and miss the game. That's a big thing. I think what does Todd Bowles' defense look like this year is going to be a big thing. I'll circle back to that at the nerdy stat of the day, but the crazy blitz heaviness that Todd Bowles employed in like the Super Bowl, for example, has kind of dialed back. And are they going to go back for it, or do they feel okay with the defensive result last year? Like, how is that going to come? Those are the two questions that are rattling around in my head.
Arif?
I mean, the Bucs are a super interesting team next year to me. Like, and it's not just like, obviously, you've got the whole quarterback thing. The rookies that they've brought in, at least in the preseason thus far, have been astoundingly good. Obviously not the North Dakota State guy. That's never going to work out. But other than that, other than the guard, I mean, they brought in 2 receivers. One undrafted free agent, Raheem Jarrett, is a really exciting deep threat to watch. They brought in a number of defensive linemen. So Kalijah Kancey was drafted in the first round, but they also drafted Yaya Diaby in the 3rd round. That's something that the consensus board liked a lot as a 3rd round pick. But Marquise Watts has had a really great preseason. These are guys that, and Sean Tucker, the running back, has had a really good preseason. These are guys that are probably not going to have an impact in the game against the Vikings for the most part. If Raheem Jarrett does have an impact in the game, it's probably a bad thing given the number of like 4th or 5th speed demon wide receivers and what they've done to the Vikings specifically. But I think that this is a team that I want to track. This is not a team that I'm all that interested in breaking down as the roster stands right now. I think there's a bunch of talent on that defense. I don't know if that's going to matter if Baker Mayfield is your quarterback. Then again, Baker's only had good years when no one has believed in him. He's the ultimate chip on your shoulder guy. So, maybe if I underestimate him, I'm wrong. If I overestimate him, I'm wrong.
Let's be specific about that, though. Baker Mayfield's had arguably 1 good year out of 5.
2, if you include half years.
Okay.
One,
I don't know if we do or not.
And a couple of half years scattered around. And one super sick Thursday night game for the Rams.
Yeah. That game was so weird, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it like, and you mentioned the holdout thing, Braun. Let me go back to that. Doesn't it feel odd that a legacy receiver entering his 10th year with the organization at 30 years old, I guess, wouldn't see the writing on the wall more clearly, like wouldn't just be willing to play out the year and then hit free agency? And it's very
weird.
A very odd holdout. This is not a guy looking for his first big contract. This is a guy that obviously has a deep connection with that organization and is now kind of entering a rebuild, if you will. Many receivers would just let the clock run out. This is a weird one, and it would be so surprising to me if he didn't.
Johnson breathing down his neck.
Is he in Tampa now?
Yeah, he's on the practice squad.
All right,
big-bodied receiver.
It's so weirdly timed. Like, why weren't we talking about this, 2 months ago?
The only Mike Evans discourse from like 2 months ago was like, wow, this guy is so underrated. He gets 1,000 yards every year. And that's all people were talking about 2 months ago. It's like, hey, no one ever talks about Mike Evans. Now he gets 1,000 yards every year, which that's basically all people say about Mike Evans. I don't know. Like,
that's the only Mike Evans take.
Yeah. And I also I feel like it's concerning that he only gets like 1,000 yards every year. Like
1,002.
Yeah, it's like 1,000 to 1,050. That's his like range of outcomes, which is
I would like
he gets injured a lot.
Can I tell you about that? Let me shed a little more light on that. Mike Evans had 1,001 yards in 2017. And if he falls short, we're not talking about this, right? Because then he'd have the one season that broke the streak. In the fourth quarter, with 1:26 to go, Mike Evans, 9-yard catch. Mike Evans, targeted but incomplete. Mike Evans, 9-yard catch. Mike Evans, 16-yard catch. It took him until 3 throws inside of the final 2 minutes of the fourth quarter of the final game for him to pull that off, and that's why that streak lives today.
Were they playing for something in that game, or were they like 2 scores behind and they were just like, all right, Mike?
Yeah, was it like a 6-win team and they didn't care?
They were playing to win the game on that drive, but they were a 5-11 team. So that was all they had to play for was Mike Evans.
It's like when Madden gives you the like
the drive goals,
the developmental, hey, if you can get this guy 200 yards, he'll get the superstar trait. And so you're like, well, screw this game.
All right. The quarterback rushes for 40 yards and I get some dev points. All right. Well, it looks like we're losing today, boys.
It'll be worth it. The timing is really weird, but I think to your question, Sam, I don't think I'm ever going to see a wide receiver like wanting more money as that weird, because wide receivers just have to be a little insane. Like they just have to see themselves that way. Mm-hmm. So even if you're like, man, I don't think he's good enough to like really deserve that. It's like, well, I'm not going to be the one to tell him that. Of course he thinks he should get more money. He's
you're the enemy that speaks softly and carries a knife.
Right. Like that's what makes wide receivers beautiful.
And what's great is that like sometimes there are wide receivers that enter the league relatively sane, but by virtue of being an NFL wide receiver, they slowly become more insane.
It's going to be great to watch that happen to Justin Jefferson. What kind of insane is he going to become?
I am so excited.
Yeah.
More on the Bucs offense here. Last year, they were one of the best pass blocking teams in the league per PFF, number 4 in the league.
Yep.
They are rolling, it appears, with Cody Mauch.
That's the North Dakota State guy.
North Dakota State guy. As their right guard, 2nd-round pick, who looks... I love his headshots. He just looks awesome.
Yeah, he doesn't have teeth, I think.
Can't even dispute that. Correct. He's lacking some teeth.
Amazing.
Hockey style.
He's from Minnesota, so I mean that's
still locked in. Is he?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Oh wow!
I know my North Dakota.
What high school?
Guys. I don't know, man. I'm sure he's got.
I love on-air research. Cody Mauch, high school, Breckenridge. And this is, maybe it's a little mean-spirited of me, but I mean it in a jolly, happy way. He looks
went to
like
Hankinson High School in North Dakota, so he's born in Minnesota.
He looks like the ghost of Christmas Past in the Scrooge movie. What's it called again?
The Christmas Carol?
Yeah, Christmas Carol.
I think the Scrooge movie is more accurate. That's a good name for it.
Scrooge the movie.
Scrooge the movie.
That'll be the remake.
But yeah, this dude was definitely like a hockey player until he got like just too big, and they were like, Devil's Lake is not supporting this. You got to go play football, man.
Yeah. That'll be a big storyline, though. Can the Bucs protect Baker Mayfield? Tom Brady was always well protected, but he also was amazing at manipulating pockets, and he was Tom Brady. Got the ball out fast. We'll see if they can. And this pass rush is going to be a mystery, too. We just don't know how it's going to work, how the Vikings respond to it. But, and I'm going back and forth here, but let's say Evans does play. Is that the first Murphy shadow situation?
I don't think so, because Chris Godwin's still there, yeah?
Yeah, Chris Godwin's good.
They probably play sides.
I think it's likely that they play sides, especially because like it's not as if Godwin has such a spectacularly different skill set. I mean, they are different, obviously, but it's not such a spectacularly different skill set that you'd be like, yeah, this guy is good when he bodies up against like, big contested catch receivers, and this guy's good against speed guys. No, it's the same guy. So not a particular reason to do that. Especially because Mike Evans is only 1,000-yard receiver guy. He's not a 50. You shadow 1,500 receivers. You don't shadow 1,000 receivers.
I was just looking at this O-line, and it's interesting. They only have one guy returning and playing the same position, and that's their center, Robert Hainsey. Tristan Wirfs switched sides. Luke Hideki switched sides and kicked outside from left guard to right tackle. He Ezra Clevelanded.
The reverse
Or I
Cleveland.
guess the reverse Ezra Cleveland. And then they've got the rookie and they got another new guy. So it's definitely a different looking group. There is still 3 of 5 of the same people, but 2 of them moving around.
Matt Filer, I mean, that's mediocre journeyman, right? I mean, he's on a new team every year. I want to say he had a good year last year, but I don't have that confirmed. Cade Otton, Kokeeft to tight end.
Kokeeft,
Gopher,
Let's go.
friend of the Ron Johnson show. Rashad White, lead back. You said Sean Tucker's had a good preseason. Trey Palmer might get some looks. Raheem Jarrett. This a young, very unexperienced offense.
Yeah,
And
like
you're
I said,
asking,
it's a
other than the
2024
two
team.
big receivers.
Yeah,
Say that again.
yeah, like I said, it's like a 2024 team. The
Yeah.
2023 Bucks look, especially on offense, just like a disaster. Like having Tristan Wirfs back there. I don't know, man. That's like having the Secret Service guard a flop house. Like what? Why?
What's in there?
Yeah. What's going on?
Part of me sees this game maybe going the way of the 2019 Vikings opener against Atlanta, where it was just an onslaught from the start.
Yeah,
it's
that game was
dangerous
over
to
by the
think
first
that way,
quarter.
but that one was a laugher early. Something tells me that there's going to be a pluckiness to the Bucs in this game. Maybe the Vikings don't have that put away ability. Defense will get exposed enough as the game goes on. But
I mean, again, the Buccaneers defense also just like they have dudes, right?
They have dudes.
Yeah, the defense is stacked.
Kalijah Kancey is going to be fun to watch, I think.
Oh yeah, no, especially so you've got like a top tier nose tackle in Vita Vea. You've got a very good pass rusher in Shaquille Barrett. You've got Kalijah Kancey. You've got some rotation along the edge rusher unit. Like I don't know that Tryon Chinka is doing everything, but he had a pretty good rookie showing. So maybe he'll show up again this year. But you've got a good rotation there. You've got Carlton Davis. You've got Jamel Dean. You've got Antoine Winfield. Right? I mean, there's like a bunch of players. Ryan Neal, like as the other safety. Like you've got a bunch of guys that know how to play. Like I thought they were going to lose half these guys in free agency. And I think they only lost they lost their worst corners in free agency, which is astounding because they have 2 really good corners that I think were both hitting free agency at the same time. They're able to retain both of them. So it's worrisome.
Moves that would suggest they are somewhat trying to win this year. They're really caught in the middle. Like it's not a great place for the Bucs to be. They don't have the clear succession plan at quarterback. And I'm not sure. We don't know if Todd Bowles is a great coach either. I mean, head coach, great coordinator. But I think a lot to learn about the Bucs, a lot to learn about the Vikings. I think there's going to be a lot of intrigue, a lot of some mysteries solved. Maybe like are the Vikings going to use a fullback a lot? Are the Vikings going to go more 11 or more 2 tight end? All these
Jordan
things
Addison,
I don't know.
wide receiver 2, or is it TJ Hawkinson?
Right.
Yeah.
Osborne or Addison, who's on the field more. Creative ways to use Brandon Powell. What's the workload between Madison, Chandler, and others?
And others.
And other people, too. Gaskin.
Myles Gaskin, the other people.
Yeah. Is Gaskin ahead of Chandler on the depth chart? Do we suspect that?
I think he was listed that way on an unofficial one sometime, but I don't think it meant anything.
Yeah, the official or the unofficial official depth charts, whatever.
Yeah.
I think Braun's got sitting on one of these. Let's get to nerdy stats today.
Analytics fans rejoice. It's time to get educated.
Whoa, you're blowing my mind right now.
With the nerdy stat of the day.
The best theme music we have on the show, the nerdy stat of the day. Let's start with Luke Braun.
Yeah, so the 2022 season represented a kind of dialing back from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers under Todd Bowles, who's run that defense when Bruce Arians was there as well. In 2021, they blitzed 45% of the time, which led the league by a mile, I believe.
That's crazy.
outside of the Brian Flores Dolphins, was the only team to even get close at 39.6%. But just last year, they ranked 11th with 28% blitz, which is still, I guess, above average, but way, way more normal. I think the thesis was the Rams really beat those blitzes in the playoffs in 2021 in that divisional game during the Rams Super Bowl run. They kind of found a way to punish it. And I think the idea of going light box, play soft, that whole fad kind of got to Todd Bowles a little bit too. And, kind of encourage the run, that whole thing. So I am very curious to see just what kind of defense Todd Bowles wants to run. If he wants to stay a little bit softer, and if he wants to kind of keep the blitzing to a normal amount, or if he just wants to go all the way back to who he is at the core and say, F it, we're blitzing every other play. Which will make this game awesome because Flores is doing that too.
Yeah.
It's just, all right, we're just going to kill quarterbacks today.
Rips.
It was fantastic. That's a good one. Arif Hasan, nerdy stat.
Sure. Well, you mentioned, Kirk Cousins, contract year type stuff, whether or not regression is due. And I made a face when you talked about regression because I believe Kirk has already regressed, which is not a permanent state. This is not a suggestion that he'll do worse this year. But, I think that the 8 fourth quarter comebacks kind of hit some worrisome statistics last year for Cousins. In a Vikings uniform, this was his lowest success rate. It was his lowest yards per attempt. It was his lowest passer rating. It was his lowest QBR. It was his lowest adjusted net yards per attempt in a Vikings uniform. All of those things suggest that he actually probably was at a low point last year in terms of quarterback effectiveness. Of course, he dug himself out of those holes with those fourth quarter comebacks. This next year, I expect his rate statistics to improve to something closer to his league average, especially because it was his lowest rate of play action passing in a Vikings uniform. If I remember that correctly, I don't have that one in front of me. And I think that that's going to increase. That was an explicit goal of the of the way Kevin O'Connell talked about the offense, right? So that we need to invest in blockers that allow us to run the ball a little bit better and allow us to show run action a little bit better. I think that everybody's gotten used to the Rams being able to run play action out of 11 personnel. I think most teams can't do that. I think the Vikings decided that they can't do that either. So I think that we're going to see a spike in play action rate, and we're going to see a spike in Kirk Cousins' statistics.
I think we should have an extended convo about the Cousins regression thing in a moment. I'm going to give you my nerdy stat of the day after I tell you about FanDuel Sportsbook and the promotions going on at FanDuel, our great partners, and the and America's #1 sportsbook, I should say. FanDuel offers this right now. New customers can bet $5, just $5, and get $200 in bonus bets into their account, guaranteed. And all customers who bet $5 at FanDuel will get $100 off the new NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube and YouTube TV. So now is the best time to join FanDuel. For those reasons and plenty others, the hundreds of ways to wager, that helps too. Check out all these NFL bets coming up this week as the games kick off. It's a very easy to use interface on the FanDuel Sportsbook app or FanDuel.com/lockedon where you can get started today. Player props, futures, spreads, alternate lines, so many different ways to get in the action at FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. My nerdy stat of the day regarding Baker Mayfield under pressure. He is getting worse with age, not better. His previous 2 years under pressure, 25th and 28th in passer rating under pressure, the 2 worst marks of his career. He was around league average in the teens with the Browns. And not only that, but his pressure to sack rate the last 2 years, worst in the NFL both seasons, around 29 or 30%. Last year, it was 30.8, which was a far cry, the #1 worst pressure to sack quarterback in the NFL, above Deshaun Watson and Matthew Stafford. For reference, Kirk Cousins. Where is Kirk Cousins? Kirk, he was 23rd. Yes, no, he was 23rd from the worst, which is actually pretty good. Weird way of saying that, but that's my nerdy stat of the day. Baker Mayfield, not good under pressure. Vikings got to get him under pressure, and they have to do so against an offensive line that has shifted some things around. though, was good protecting Tom Brady last year.
I think 25th in pass block win rate or something last year. It's taken a dive.
The Bucs
Yeah.
pass block win rate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. 2 years ago it was stunning.
Yeah. Interesting because PFF liked their overall protection as a team last year, 4th in the league. But let's see what it was the year before that. Year before that, they were 2nd. So they were twice as bad last year in ranking. Kirk Cousins. Let's talk about Kirk Cousins. He is entering a contract year. Arif talked about the ways in which he regressed last year. And I think we haven't entertained maybe enough the possibility of Kirk Cousins hitting that regression point. And we like to avoid talking about it because he is extremely durable, cares about his body, hiring trainer guys to live with him basically and do all this stuff. Body guys, whatever you want to call it. Is Kirk Cousins going to be a sort of fall off the cliff quarterback, or is it going to be a trickle down linear decline for him as he gets into the latter half of his 30s? Luke Braun, let's get your thoughts on that.
That's a tough question. I have no idea. If I had to guess, probably something more linear, just because Kirk Cousins is not like, for me, the guys who fall off a cliff are guys who rely on particular kinds of athleticism that then escape them. And Kirk Cousins has an athleticism that will escape him in terms of like arm strength and stuff, like with all quarterbacks. But I think the way that he prepares and works in between games, like kind of the stuff we saw in like the Netflix documentary, can kind of help mitigate that as you get older. So probably more of a trickle kind of thing. I think Kirk Cousins is who he's been for the last 10 years until he proves otherwise.
And I think some of it too is, to what do you attribute some of the bad stats last year? Was it a Kirk regression? Was it an offensive change that led to 14 career-high interceptions, almost a career low in completion percentage at just under 66%? And like Arif said, success rate, one of the lowest of his careers. Do you attribute that, Arif, to the change in scheme or some Kirk stuff?
I think a lot of it is change in scheme. I do want to push back against what Luke said about the nature of quarterbacks falling off. But to answer your question specifically, I think a lot of it is just like, because a lot of times when we talk about a change in scheme, we're talking about a change in offensive play calling style. We're talking about changes in terminology, that might make things a little bit different. Maybe it changes how protections are used. And I think, maybe all of those have played a role, but Kirk has dealt with changes in terminology his entire career, like famously, right? But they've all fit within the same offensive style. And specifically, they've asked him to do the same thing. Now, before last year, right before the season started last year, O'Connell mentioned that he wants to change how Kirk sees the field. I think that played a pretty big role. The idea that Kirk would stay on to those deeper reads and wait a little bit for a deeper play to develop rather than go through his progressions at the same rate that he normally would, or that he would take his eyes somewhere that he normally doesn't take his eyes based on what he's seeing with the defense. I think that changed his comfort with the offense. Now, it would have been ideal if, over the course of the year, he grew more comfortable with the offense. I think that would make my take sound really good. I don't think that actually happened all that much. But I do think that there's something about the way that he approached the game that was a little bit different than the way that he approached it in previous years that I think contributed to this in some ways. I think also, again, the play action thing, I think, plays a pretty big role. He is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL at play action for whatever reason, whether it's because he knows how to do, the play action fake, that's a skill that quarterbacks spend a lot of time developing, whether it's because, those half field reads are just so nice to him that, those bootlegs are very clean and easy for him to figure out. I don't know, but he's very good at that sort of thing. And so I think those will come back. As for the falling off the cliff thing, I think it seems correct that quarterbacks that rely on their physical strength are much more likely to fall off a cliff than quarterbacks that are primarily like anticipation throwers. But you take a look at quarterbacks that have fallen off a cliff, they include players like Peyton Manning, who in 2015 just fell off a cliff, Tom Brady, and even Drew Brees a little bit. I think, maybe you could say Matt Ryan was a little bit more linear.
I thought he was a cliff too, a little bit.
You think?
That's more of a high level take, but he went from 35-7 in 2018, and then after that, like his completion percentage dropped off 3% the next year, never recovered. His interceptions shot up and never recovered after that. The team got worse for sure around him.
I think you have to kind of rediscover yourself when your arm dies on you. Like that's what Tom Brady did in 2020, and that's why he was able to refigure out the offense and win the Super Bowl. You have to redial in like what you can and can't throw and what you can get away with. I think that's what Aaron Rodgers is going to have to do with the Jets.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, that's a good. Also, I'm looking at Matt Ryan, and this very much looks like a gradual decrease in effectiveness, Sam. like from
starting when?
From 2018. So he reduces his yards per attempt from 8.1 to 7.3. His career average at that point had been around 7.5. So he goes from about 7.5 to 7.3, 7.3, 7.1, 6.6.
Right.
That feels like linear. A gradual. Yeah.
That's particular stat definitely linear. Yep.
But I do think that like when you have a quarterback that has to work around their limitations, it's just there's only so many dials you can turn, essentially. There's only so much that you can do. There's only so much anticipation that Peyton Manning can have for his Ducks to turn into an effective offense, or at least one that doesn't seem catastrophically bad. And I think that you kind of hit that, and it just kind of falls off. So you are building in all of these elements of the way that you're adjusting to the way that you play quarterback that are essentially not necessarily ideal ways to play, but ways to cover for your deficiencies. And I'm not going to say it's like building a house of cards, but it's building like an intricate, method of quarterbacking that once one of those things stops working, it all kind of falls apart. So I think that there is something to the fact that these quarterbacks that are physically, kind of meant to be, more big arm throwers or more athletic guys, that I think are actually more likely because they get a little bit more time to gradually adjust to the changing athleticism, that counterintuitively, it seems like they may actually have more of a linear drop off. I think we saw a little bit of that with Russell Wilson. We'll see what happens with him this year. Obviously Cam Newton, that didn't happen, but also he got into a car crash. So, kind of hard to, but I mean, like Ben Roethlisberger felt a little bit more linear, but I think that a quarterback like Cousins, I think one day he's just not going to have it. I don't know that that's going to be this year or anything. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think that one day he's just not going to have it.
The arm to me looks the same as it did last year. So that is to say no drop off. But if you think about his arm 2018, do you think there's been any drop off in arm strength? Because that's a lot of what we're talking about. Like the arm is going to die at some point.
I mean, I will say that like 2019, I was really impressed with some of his like throws. Like his arm, I think, was really live, and I don't know that I've seen some of that, but like I don't know that it's dropped off. I think that he's just choosing to do different things. I don't know that his arm strength isn't there, but there are some moments where it's just like, oh, okay, yeah, no, he has an arm. It's tough because quarterbacks entering the league have had better arm strength as the years have gone on. So it's like when Derek Carr entered the league, he had one of the strongest arms in the NFL back in 2014, right? And now I don't think he's in the top half, and I don't think his arm strength has decreased any, right? So it's tough to have like a good sense, like when you've got, these Josh Allens entering the league. Now, maybe, like Bryce Young is going to reset our metrics on what counts as, league average arm strength. But, for the most part, the guys entering the NFL the past couple of years have had just ridiculous arm talent compared to, previous years. So that also makes it kind of tough to make these comparisons.
So the contract year for Cousins begins on Sunday. We'll obviously be, keeping everything in context around that as we evaluate Kirk this year, and whether those regression signs and I think it's safe to say that if he duplicates last year statistically and loses the crazy fourth quarter clutchness, which is almost guaranteed to regress majorly, that would not be a strong enough 2023 for us to clamor for him to re-sign with the Vikings, or the Vikings to re-sign him is probably the better way to say it. Like, there would need to be a progression beyond what we saw last year. Is that safe to say? At minimum.
For him to get an extension? Yeah.
For that to even be, I think, in like the conversation.
I think the timeline is what I can't get out of my head there, because the regular season ends in mid-January now, and his contract voids in like the middle of February. They have like a month to get a quarterback contract done. They're going to have to be very motivated.
I think it's going to be one of those things where it's going to be extremely results oriented. I think if they don't win a playoff game, they're just going to be like, look, the stats are whatever, man. We got to win. Bye. Like, I think that's
whether that's fair or not.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. And I think that the accelerated timeline is a participant in that, particular process. But I think that this has just been the question with Cousins. Again, whether or not that makes sense or whether or not it's fair, I think it's going to be playoff success is going to play maybe the biggest role. If he has an even worse statistical year, but they win a playoff game, they're probably still going to be like, yeah, this is working out. This is fine. We could do this. But I think if he has a better statistical year and they don't win a playoff game, they're just going to be like, yeah, we've seen that. We don't need that anymore.
Yeah, imagine, because the entire process of contract negotiation has to go start to finish, and imagine that happening after last year's playoff game and like the 4th and 8, and that was the last thing you saw. And like that is the taste in your mouth the entire time. That would be extraordinarily unfair. Cousins, by all accounts, played a really good game in that playoff game, but it still, I think, would have like a bad effect on the contract process in and of itself.
I love talking legacies, especially when it's all over in a player's career. Cousins' legacy is going to be really fascinating 5 years down the road. I want to touch on Kyle Rudolph's as well, as he announced he's going to be retiring as a Minnesota Viking thanks to his 10-year career here. Reminder that we are partners with SiriusXM and the SXM app. Search Locked On Sports Minnesota. Find all of our shows. That includes Ron Johnson, Minnesota Sports Rankum, and the Minnesota Football Party. Also find the local broadcast. Get every pitch of the Twins games on the SXM app. Just search Twins. Kyle Rudolph, 10 years in Minnesota, 4,488 yards, 48 touchdowns. What do you think he ranks as a Vikings tight end?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Top 3?
What? So what? It's like what? Steve Jordan? Like
Steve
who
Jordan.
are?
Steve Jordan, Stu Voigt.
And you've got
Visante
a bunch of
Shenko.
Yeah, you got a bunch of Shenko types
really
that are
Shenko. Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah,
Klein Saucer, but I don't think. I mean, he was more of a fan favorite for.
He was fun to watch, but yeah,
he was fun.
That's a tough part of the. Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think it's no matter what, he ends up top 5, but kind of where in that top 5. That one's interesting. There's not like a Jimmy Graham or anything like that where you're just like, yeah, there's the guy.
I don't think you can come up with 4 guys that had more impact on the Vikings than Rudolph. I think you can do Steve Jordan. You could like argue Stu Voigt, but then you got to start getting really weird takes about like Jermaine Wiggins or Joe Sensor. I don't know. I think he's probably second or third, depending on how nostalgic you are about the guys in the 70s.
So I would say, yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously Steve Jordan 1. Maybe this is just like me being like trying to prove I'm a football guy, but I got to put Klein Saucer 2, right? I don't know. Like, he played more games. I think
I'm not going to stop you. Blocking rules.
Yeah, I think he earned some captaincies along the way that Rudolph didn't get. I don't know. That one's tough, but I feel like he may have had a bigger impact. But I think Rudolph has to be 3. I think you got to put him ahead of Voigt and Shenko. Voigt was fine. He was good, but
yeah, he was overshadowed so much by like everything else going on those teams.
Yeah.
Braun, you're the historian. What happened to Joe Sensor that abruptly cut his career short? I mean, obviously an injury, but
I don't know that.
Okay.
It looks like it. I think it was a knee injury because he had a 1,000-yard season in 1981, and that's obviously unbelievable. In 1981,
Steve Jordan showed up, I think, would be the answer, right? Or did
he missed all of 1983 with the knee injury, like all of 1983, And then in 1984,
Yeah.
he started 1 game, only was active for 8 games, though.
Yeah, they picked Steve Jordan in the 7th round in 82. So if Joe Sensor was hurt and then suddenly the backup comes in and plays well, that'll do it.
Yeah.
But then Sensor, like his career ended too. It's not like he went on to play elsewhere. So that injury
happen.
probably played a gigantic role.
Coming off an injury and you just got benched for a 7th round pick. Yeah, that's not going to get you a lot of jobs.
Yeah, no.
Before we knew, like
yeah. Well, when was true NFL free agency? When did Reverend Reggie White bless us with free agency?
Oh, that was that the 82 strike?
I thought there was Plan B free agency, but like free agency proper happened in 93. So that might
all the way to the
have
Vikings.
also played a role in him not having anything to go to after that, right? If the Vikings didn't want him, if they didn't want to release his contract, he just didn't have any place to go.
I don't think I think I agree with you guys that Rudolph is 2 or 3. I also think TJ Hawkinson can quickly become 2. Like, I think if he plays out the contract,
sure,
I think that he could pass Rudolph, and maybe not for longevity, but certainly for impact and productivity. Rudolph had a lot of clunkers. I mean, of his 10 years, how many, like, he had a 3-year peak from 16 to 18, and the stuff before that and after that was nice red zone guy, but not that consistent.
Yeah, as he got older, and this is the thing with like the legacies of players, is it's a lot easier to assess it once it's been a while. Because right now, our most recent memories of Kyle Rudolph are like a season where he was kind of getting old and he was more of a blocker. And then this thing in New York and Tampa that didn't really work out. But yeah, I mean, like 5 years from now, we're not going to remember that. We're going to remember catching the ball in overtime in the Superdome in the 2019 playoffs. And we're going to remember, cool catches from the 2017 season and more of that stuff.
So I'll say this, his rookie year was crazy fun. It was so fun. He and I don't think he got that many touchdowns his rookie year. I think he was the next year he got like a bunch of touchdowns.
That was the 2K Peterson year, and Percy Harvin was there for half of it, getting MVP consideration. Right. So there's a lot going on.
So yeah, so it's just 9 touchdowns. Okay, great. This guy's got 2,000 yards.
Yeah, right. There was a lot going on.
So he was for the first couple of years of his career, he was primarily like this highlight dude that would reel in all these crazy catches from way outside of his frame and then drop some easy passes. And it was just like, oh, at least we got the highlights, right?
Yeah, we got the cool ones.
Yeah. And then I remember constantly the discussion around him was that he had suffered an injury, I think it was like a hamstring injury or something at Notre Dame that reduced his speed. So his combine speed wasn't very good. But when he was a junior or whatever at Notre Dame, or the year before he declared for the draft, he was one of the fastest tight ends in the country. And he's just going to get that back. He's going to get that back. And now we're going to have a multidimensional tight end that has the ability to stretch the field like Jimmy Graham and block like Matt Spaeth. And he's just going to be Gronk too. And there was like a whole thing. And then he said it. I remember that. He said, hey, people, he compared himself a little bit to Gronkowski. Mostly he was just like, people don't account for the fact that Gronkowski like blocks a lot, which I feel like people do, but fine.
It might have taken him a bit.
That's fair. No, that's fair. But he was like, I block so much, and he wasn't a great blocker, but then it turned into like, I don't get enough recognition. This is like my specific memory of Rudolph. I know that we're honoring Rudolph's but this is like what I remember.
No, we're not honoring. Get into it. We're just talking about
personally
it.
at points on
I kind of, yeah. I'll talk about that in a second too. But but like a lot of it was just like, I don't get enough recognition for my blocking. And it's like, you're not good at that. You don't want that. You don't want that. So he talked a lot about that. And then he complained a lot that like he doesn't get receiving statistics because the Vikings keep him in to block all the time, which was both true and false, right? On passing plays, the Vikings would keep him in to block more often than almost any other receiving tight end. That number is not that high. It's just not that high of a number for it to be meaningful. So like there was this weird contentiousness that he had about not getting enough recognition. And then
he did an interview before he left too. And he was pretty honest about why he was leaving.
Did he get the ball more?
Yeah. Well, he's like, hey, I'm not going to be like he had a very direct way of saying that it's hard to be productive when you're blocking 60% of the game, something like that.
Yeah, I remember that, and we ran the
shot.
numbers, and he wasn't blocking 60% of the game. But what your feelings
That
are.
feels like hope, anyways.
Yeah,
like,
I get it.
Yeah,
but,
all right, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, but he was putting together a couple of 300-yard seasons for his final couple of years with the Vikings. So he had this 800-yard season that was great. I think the Vikings also threw the ball more than they'd ever had, I think, in Vikings history that year. So it's just okay, great, 800 yards. Maybe you'll be able to turn that into something. And then he got 500, and then he got 500 again or something like that, and that was it. Yeah, I don't there was just a lot of that. And the his missing athleticism was a big deal. We eventually stopped talking about it. But I at some point had mentioned that the Vikings kept on drafting these super athlete tight ends that were not good at tight end.
Mm-hmm.
So you got your Michael Pruitt and your Bucky Hodges, and there's a couple more in there, but that was the deal. And I remember Kansas City was doing the tight end shovel pass a ton at the time. And so I tweeted out oh, wow, the Vikings need to get an athletic tight end so they can do that. Knowing that they had already drafted 3 of them, right? And it was just not working out. It was the joke is you know, let's get an athletic tight end. Maybe we could run some of these plays. And he got mad at me because he thought I was calling him unathletic, which I guess kind of I was, but really I was just making fun of the fact that they drafted this many guys. And then he threw all of them under the bus. He's yeah, they drafted a bunch of athletic tight ends. How'd that work out?
And then he had to apologize.
Yeah.
One of them. So one of the tight ends.
He had to apologize to Michael Pruitt.
Yeah, Michael called him out.
Yeah, he's hey, man, what's up? And
Michael Pruitt, who's still carving out a good, where is he now?
Is he still with Tennessee? That doesn't seem right.
No way. He's still with Tennessee. He wasn't with Tennessee, actually, during the joints. I specifically remember that.
Right. Okay,
Falcons. Yeah. That's what I thought.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Him and Parker Hesse just hanging out.
Yeah.
Watching Kyle Pitts catch touchdowns.
Yeah.
But it was a whole deal. He mentioned that someone had mentioned that he got more yak per catch than almost any other tight end in the NFL. Also, he had the lowest depth of target that year too. So, that was a big part. It was yeah, you're getting thrown 3-yard passes.
Okay, I'm going to find this.
Yeah. And then so he tweeted that at me about how the athletic tight ends work out. He had to apologize. And then he didn't block me, but he blocked a bunch of my followers. Some of whom were on his side, but he just didn't want to do the take the time to figure out what's going, and just blocked a bunch of people. It was really fun. And then I think the final thing was I reported that he was at a golf event. He was missing OTAs.
Oh my God, this.
And I reported he was at a golf event, and it was a charity golf event, which I didn't use the word charity. I thought that was obvious from the phrase golf event and not he's golfing. Because that's what PR told me. He's at a golf event. So oh, he's not at OTAs because he's at a golf event. It's not he's holding out or anything like that. And so a bunch of people got mad at me because they got the implication that I was criticizing him for golfing during practice, as opposed to him being there for a charitable reason. And I excluded the charity, and then he got mad because I excluded the charity, but he misattributed someone else's tweet to me, where they specifically called him out for golfing. It was a whole deal. I have never had a positive relationship with this guy, I guess, is the conclusion of the story.
You and Rudolph and you and Greenway. Just the legacy players of the 20 teens.
Greenway was so much more good natured about it. He would call me out at practice, ribbing. And I loved that.
Yeah,
that rules.
Yeah, Rudolph took Rudolph very seriously.
Yeah,
I will say that.
When Greenway got his pick 6, which I believe was on his birthday, at then TCF Bank Stadium, and he ran it back. It wasn't right away or anything like that, but a couple hours later, he tweets at me "Hey man, what's up?" Which I thought was funny. The way he handled it is a lot better than I think Rudolph just getting mad at me, but taking it out on my followers. I don't know, man. Anyway, he'll be honored in week 3.
Yeah.
The highest I can find his yak per reception is 10th in 2020.
in 2020.
which was a very
That was
unproductive
definitely
year.
not the year that people were talking about as yet.
Okay.
No, it wasn't that he had the most. It was that he had more than this specific tight end. I think it was more than Travis Kelce.
Okay.
That must have been. It's like
Oh,
people
okay.
don't know that he has more yak than George Kittle and Travis Kelce. And it's like, yeah, they're catching balls 40 yards downfield, man. I like
Yeah, you're catching rollouts in the flat. With Rudolph, for me, I remember like the first, I think it was like 13, 14, 15. He missed like 8 games 3 years in a row with some injury or other. And then like having the hamstring thing. And everybody was like, oh, he's made of glass. He's, a dainty little tight end and stuff. And I remember like people always get super like mean about that when you get injured a lot. They're like, oh, you can't, you're going to stiff wind will knock you over. It's like, okay, yeah, you tell him that. But
for like a lot of those people, get tackled once. Like just
right, like go on if I went on a blocking sled once, I would crumble into dust. Like, come on,
Yeah.
like know who you are. But
like,
then he went
so
on
many
an
good
Iron Man
videos
streak for like 4 years, and it's like, yeah. And that the lesson I learned from Kyle Rudolph, and while he was on that Iron Man streak, was when I was like first starting to write about the Vikings, and the lesson was, injuries might just be luck, man. Sometimes bad luck things happen consecutively. It's not a pattern every time. And I think I like trained my brain to understand that like broader concept, but also never call a player made of glass unless you can take them in a fight, which I never can. So I never will.
Right. Yeah. Like I couldn't take any of the kickers that the Vikings have rostered in a fight.
Absolutely
much less
not.
a tight end. Right. But yeah, I mean, there's so many great videos of like just random people taking sacks from NFL edge rushers. Like there's a good one out there of like Jared Allen just wailing on a guy.
It's like
you
would be
do not want the
hospitalized.
smoke.
Like, it's
man.
over.
Yeah.
Right, here's what the show looks like this week on the Minnesota Football Party. Tomorrow, Reggie Wilson and Luke Inman. We answer fan questions. We talk more about Vikings Bucks. And then on Thursday, guys, get ready. Thursday is the day we make our official, specific season predictions down to the yard. And then we replay our predictions after the season and see how dumb we sound. Always excited for that bit. And then we'll also make our first gambling picks of the regular season FanDuel contest. And remember, I have earned an advantage through my preseason fantasy victory. Arif Hasan has earned a disadvantage. And
until the trade deadline, you got to remember to use it.
Until the trade deadline, that's when the advantage expires. You're right. It's kind of like the immunity idol in Survivor expires before, the final tribal council. So that's exciting. That's Thursday. And then the roundtable on Friday with Reggie Wilson, Luke Inman, Ron Johnson, myself. So big week on Locked On Sports Minnesota. Arif Hasan, thank you. Find his work, Wide Left Substack, at Arif Hasan NFL. Luke Braun, Locked On Vikings, at Luke Braun NFL. Enjoy the next couple days, gentlemen. We'll talk to you on Thursday on the Minnesota Football Party, part of Locked On Sports Minnesota.